Good afternoon. My name is Kim Shepherdson Watson. I am the chairperson of the Board of Education, and I would like to call our special meeting to order. Today is September 12th, and once again, it is 5:45. The second agenda item is actually looking for a nomination to fill our Board of Ed occupancy. Thank you. So you will nominate who?
Mr.
William Horgan, perhaps.
Okay.
That guy over there.
All right. All right. Do I have a second? I have Liz and I also have Matthew. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of Dr. William Horgan filling the vacancy of the Board of Education, please say aye.
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 Oppose? Abstain? That motion has carried. We now have a full board of 9. And our last agenda item is to have the oath of office to our new board member. And I'll have you guys, so Dr. Horgan, welcome. Yay. All right, and there's Betsy.
We're going to stand by the flag. You'll raise your right hand and you solemnly swear that you will follow the state constitutions, the town charter, and the rules of the Board of Education for the town of Groton to the best of your ability and serve the town as a board member. Congratulations, you are now on.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right,
All
thank
right,
you. All right.
You're welcome.
All right.
Enjoy.
All right, so you can actually, this will be your, since you're now a board member, I would like to call for the adjournment of the 5:45 meeting.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Dr. Horgan. Or Horgan, excuse me. I will be misplacing. Okay, all those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion is carried. Our meeting for the 5:45 is over. Yay! All right, Mark, are we ready to rock and roll?
You are.
All right, so good evening. My name is Kim Shepherdson Watson, and I am the chairperson of the Groton Board of Education. And I'm going to call to order the committee of the whole meeting, which is September 12th. And once again, it's 6 o'clock. The second order of business, and also so this does not get me in trouble with Miss Joan, is the approval of our meeting minutes of August 15th. Do I have a motion for accepting them?
So moved.
I have a motion. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
I have, William has seconded that. Do I have any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the approval of the committee of the whole meeting minutes of August 15th, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstain? That motion has carried.
Kim,
Did I?
Kim,
Oh, Liz.
I'm sorry I'm not there. I apologize, but I abstain.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
just wanted to know.
Miss Joan, did you get that?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Thank you, my friend. All right. Our next is the report of the opening of school. And so, Ms. Austin?
Well,
you-
I have to say that at convocation, I, talked to my faculty and staff to say, our theme is we're coming back to community, just coming back. And I have, Phil and I have been through all the schools multiple times. And the thing I keep hearing from staff, from preschool teachers to high school teachers, is it just feels right. It feels good. The kids seem to have come back kind of excited. We're excited. It just feels, and I'm not even going to say normal or better than normal. It's back to community. And I noticed that when the buses rolled in that first day of school at Fitch, it was like 7:25 to 7:40, 7:45, but they were all there, and then they went right to the middle school, and they were there on time. And it's been a smoother ride this year. It's not a perfect ride. We still have buses that, we're hearing some overcrowding. Our buses are never loaded more than two, mostly two to a seat. For the secondary, there might be a couple benches that have threes, but we're actually working with the bus company. Sam's been terrific, and so is our transportation team. Just making sure that, we've got the routes going the best way they can. They're not too long. There might be some tweaking that needs to happen once we get all the information from the bus company, and our transportation meets with the bus company to iron out some of the details. So thank you, parents, for being very patient, and kids, but it does seem like a smoother ride. One of the messages that I said to faculty and staff was, we all need to be a champion for a kid. We need to watch out for kids who might need a champion. And I even mentioned the mentor program, which I'm happy to say we met with Sharon Schick, and we'll be revitalizing the mentor program. And looking forward to that. We have a planning meeting coming up at the end of the month, and we're going to post for a certified physician to help with this expansion, and working with Sharon and using our community coordinators who were really hired for the sake of helping our volunteers and our mentors, so that we have some school-based people right there to help us out. So those are some things that I'm really excited about. I also talked about how Groton 2020 Dream has come to full fruition, as you all know, and the promises of equity, excellence, and efficiency will be leaning more into and continuing on this journey. And I look forward to our retreat with the board so that we can actually put some action steps into that and start planning. And then I got very good news today that our Nurturing Global Mindedness with World Languages $1 million grant has come through Department of Defense. I got the yes letter today, so I'm very excited about that. I know we have a process to follow where I need to go to, the town council.
I think the first step is that we need to vote on it. And if you need it done sooner than later, maybe we can add a special meeting to that, but we'll need to vote for full acceptance of the grant.
Okay. Yep.
And then it will need to go to the town council and the RTM per charter. Anything above $10,000 needs to go for approval.
Right. So we'll do that. We've done that before. We'll do that again. Yeah. As part of that grant, we were to apply for JROTC and the Naval National Defense Cadet Corps. We got that acceptance letter from the Secretary of Navy as well. So we're going to start with an after-school club. So there has been a lot going on this year. I think the most exciting thing last week was to get, all of our preschool and kindergartners in, and it was a rainy day, their first day. And if you could have seen them lined up coming off the buses with their galoshes and their raincoats and their umbrellas, and just happy to be back, and the teachers happy to have them. So it's been a good opening. Not perfect, but it's better than we've had in a long time. It feels good. So.
Any questions, Liz?
Yeah, it's more of a comment than a question. I wanted to thank Sam and his crew, because my neighbors have been thrilled with what the bus schedule has been. The first day was a little rocky, and then all of a sudden it just smoothed right out by day 2. So I just wanted to say thank you, because that's always has been an issue, and there are continues, some little wrinkles, but thanks, Sam, and thank your crew for us, please.
Will do. Thank you.
Anyone else for comments or questions?
I have a question about the certified physician. Is this a time to ask?
The certified position for,
Susan mentioned for the mentors.
sure. She might mention it.
What What does that mean, especially in terms of how much is that gonna cost?
So we're looking at the Art ESSER funds, which really is part of this involvement of community and engaging parents and community. And we think by growing this program, it is going to be instrumental in helping with social emotional learning and all other things.
Yeah, we know that. I love you. But first of all, how is the person gonna be hired? And secondly, what is the implication for the budget?
So the protocol is that we post the position. We'll probably bring it to finance and facility for the amount of money. And we'll use the Art ESSER indicators. So we have several other positions that are stipend positions in Art ESSER for things like an SEL coordinator. Trying to think of the other things, DEI coordinator, but that one is really a full year long.
And is there a job description so we'll know what the,
We're working on that.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this will be regular conversations, that as the information progresses
Right.
with your staff, in terms of that, that we will continue to do that, because we'll obviously need to think about that position past
Right.
the ARPA. And so
We're thinking really it's going to be a position that we generate. We do have a coordinator position still, which is what Sharon Schick is, and she'll be working with this person. But this is kind of a revitalization process. So we think it's going to take a couple years to get it going, and then we can still continue with a coordinator like we have. But we really feel there's a need to get it up and at 'em again. And we need the help and support of a certified staff to do that with us. I had one other thing to mention, because I know the board is very interested in open houses. Tomorrow, Charles Barnum, Thames River, and Mystic River are all on between 4 or 5:30. I know you got the list. Northeast is postponing because they were also doing a picnic to go along with it. So I don't know if the weather prevailed or they just wanted to postpone it till later, but most of them are very casual open houses, like an open house usually is. And it's a meet and greet your teacher. It's sometimes the PTO is sponsoring a picnic. It's people gathering and learning more about the school. So just to know, it's kind of an informal thing, but you're certainly welcome to join.
yeah, I think that you saw that I sent an email to kind of just encourage for us to kind of show our faces. So absolutely. Any other questions along with that? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on. But by the way, you kind of slid that in. Congratulations on that grant. That was it's pretty impressive how many DODEA grants that we get. And so I say thank you to your team, to Sharon, who is doing all that, and I'm looking forward to hearing more information about that grant.
Thank you.
But congratulations. So let's go into another DODEA conversation, which is our STEM grant.
Kim,
So-
I have a question for number 3,
Sure.
before you move on to 4.
Okay, I didn't see your hand. Sorry, your hand
That's
blended in with the curtain.
Sorry. Yes, I know Susan mentioned this, and we received an email from her about bus number 10, and that they were reaching out to make sure students didn't get on the wrong bus. And that only, what did you say, 50 to 54 students are scheduled for each bus? So
Out of the
why do you
71.
think this is, well, that's capacity.
Right.
But you have no secondary buses scheduled for more than 50 to 54. So can someone tell me why then is this one particular bus so overcrowded? Where does it pick up that maybe students could be getting on the wrong bus?
You're on, Sam.
Okay, I guess I'll
Well,
answer that
Sam
question.
and Ted have been a tag team on this. They've really been doing due diligence, monitoring the kids as they're getting off the bus and then monitoring when they get on. So I know the ones we're putting on the bus are the right kids, because we have a little more control than when we pick them up in the morning. But I'll just say that.
Yeah, so we've actually asked for the tapes on that bus 10, and we've found that the seats were populated with 2 kids per seat, with the exception of one seat, which only had 1 child in that seat. So that's what we've seen in the tapes that we've been able to get. So if it's overpopulated, I don't know where that exactly is coming from. I know that there was some concern from the bus driver that there were 3 or 4 kids that didn't ride the bus today, and they would have to sit 3 to a seat if they got on the bus. So the bus driver seems to think that it's unsafe for 3 kids to be in a seat. The buses are expected to take up to 3 in a seat, so I don't know exactly what the problem is.
But I think one of the things we always do, Rita, and this may help, is that our team will meet with the bus company leadership. We've done this in the past, and they'll go through those runs, and there may be some buses on the other side of town that aren't as full. And so they might be able to do some combining. So I know that they haven't had a chance yet to tweak it. So we're doing it on our end administratively, you know, looking to see which buses seem to have more, you know, are more full, and the ones that aren't full at all. So they'll have to tweak some of that so that we get more of a balance.
Right.
I
'Cause
know that our staff in the transportation office said that they have the radio on in the office, so they overheard the bus driver reporting back to the garage that, or to the dispatcher, that the bus was overloaded, and she was concerned about that. So I believe that some of the kids are repeating that when they get home. But anything that we've seen and any of the numbers that STA has given us indicate that there are only 2 to a seat on that bus presently. But we're going to continue to monitor it and keep looking at for the next couple of weeks anyways. We're getting numbers from all bus drivers over the course of the next 2 weeks so that we can move students to different buses if that's needed in special areas. I know that in military housing area is one area where there's a large population. Some kids may be hopping on different buses. That's possible, but it's still a large number of kids there. So we're looking at that. And of course, Quantic Bridge as well. So, and Branford Manor, as we always try and keep a close eye on. Ted, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, and today at the high school, we called down every single student that rides buses from those different areas to make sure they understood what bus number they should be getting on in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we were specifically at bus 10 to make sure that the bus driver's checking in those students. So we just wanted to make sure that, because those buses are over by Gold Star Highway area, so there's buses going in both directions because kids are not supposed to be crossing that road. Well, some of our high school students, I think, may be crossing that road simply to get on an earlier bus. So we want to make sure that the students know which bus they should be taking so that our lists are accurate to what bus they're actually on.
Thank you. I knew you had this all, you would handle it very well, but I just wanted the public to hear it, what we were doing. And I do feel though that 3 to a seat in high school is way too much. I mean, they're big kids. So elementary, maybe, but even then I feel that it's safer with 2, but I know that you're handling it, and thank you.
Before I move on to number 4, is there anyone? All right, I'm moving on. Let's do the DODEA STEM grant.
And I actually wrote about this in board notes, introducing Ben Moon. Some of you may remember he's presented for us. He works very hard at CK as their STEM coordinator. And recently he's taken on an additional responsibility with this DODEA grant as we close it out. It's a 2018. This is the 5th year. Carol Marsiglio had worked on it for the first 4 years, but she retired this year with her husband. And so Ben stepped up to the plate. He was just a really good person to help us with this. He helps us with a lot of the curriculum writing, K-5, and spearheads a lot of the STEM work anyway in the district. So we're glad to have him on board, and he's going to report to you a little bit about how we're finalizing. I know it's really important to the board and to us that we have sustainability plan built into these $1 million grants, and so that we can continue the work moving forward. He actually also oversaw our summer program with Christy Post we had 2 weeks of STEM camp for our elementary kids. So I sent the slides in board notes too.
Rita and Liz, can you hear Ben? And if you could just say something so he can hear.
Can you hear me okay?
Not really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We need those microphones.
How about now? Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. You're welcome. Good. All right. Well, nice to see everybody and thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces. So like Susan said, I've been working in Groton Public Schools for about 15 years, mostly at Catherine Kolmaski as their STEAM coordinator, and prior to that as a 3rd and 4th grade teacher. Also a proud Groton Public Schools alumni. So it's good to be here. Wanted to share a little bit about what we've done, what's been accomplished with the STEM grant so far, and then, like Susan said, talk a little bit about what we're thinking for year 5 as we move to close out the grant. So just in the way of just a little bit of history, kind of like where this started, awarded in 2018. So we're entering the final year of the grant. And really the grant, kind of the overarching goal was to provide opportunities for Groton's military students to achieve greater college and career readiness. That was the big picture of the grant. And it was 3 major initiatives to achieve that goal. One was implementing NGSS, so it's kind of a transformation of our science curriculum, K through 12. The second was STEM extracurricular activities, including summer programs, specifically at the elementary level. And then the third was implementing the IBCP program at the high school, otherwise known as career-related programming. Been working on getting those acronyms down, so I think I got it. High school, correct me if I'm wrong. And expansion of Project Lead the Way at the high school. So those were kind of the big 3. So that, yes. What's NGSS stand for? Good question.
Next Generation Science Standards. He knew you were going to ask that question.
I've been telling them that.
Yeah. More
We need a
acronyms.
list.
We do.
I don't think that came in the cave book for board members. We need our own list.
For sure. So that first major initiative, implementing NGSS, really meant a complete transformation of science instruction, and that happened all across the country. And through the grant, we've been able to accomplish that shift from science not just being learning about facts, but really using science practices and engineering practices to explain scientific phenomena. That's what NGSS is all about in a nutshell. So we've partnered with organizations like CREC and used them for professional learning at the elementary level, at the middle level, and at the high school level to purchase curriculum units, to train teachers, and most recently to do some revisions of curriculum that we've implemented over the last couple of years. There were teams of teachers that worked over the summer, paid out of the grant, that worked to adjust our elementary science curriculum in grades 3 through 5 based on teacher feedback, so that we can really start to make this curriculum that we've purchased from CREC, make it our own. And that's one way we can keep that curriculum sustainable, is by
And
really
really
housing
using
it.
the state's assessments, like the interim assessment blocks.
Yeah.
Test for NGSS in grades 5, 8, and 11. And we find it's really important to use those assessment blocks from SBAC and NGSS throughout the school year, so kids really, fine tune, and it gives teachers information to help monitor and adjust their instruction to meet the needs of the kids.
So my understanding that this is the 3rd set of metrics. We'll have done the English language arts metrics, we'll have math metrics, and it will be this 3rd set.
Mhm.
Thank you.
That's right.
Yeah.
By God, I think he's gone.
We issued a survey to K through 5 teachers about science curriculum end of last winter. And one of the items that came up was needing more assessment resources. So to Susan's point, a big focus of that summer work that teachers did was incorporating more opportunities for assessment in the science curriculum, including the NGSS interims, those IEBs, more acronyms. Big initiative number 2 was growing STEM extracurricular activities. Probably the biggest focus with this initiative was the summer STEM programs. This summer, I had the pleasure of being a part of that and served over 400 kids from all of Groton's elementary schools. We used engineering units from Boston Museum of Science and included even some computer science and coding this summer to really give all the kids in Groton, no matter what elementary school they go to, opportunities to engage in STEM subjects. And then community partnerships. Another piece of the grant was field trips and in-school programming to expose elementary kids to STEM subjects. And the grant's been supporting that for a number of years at all of our elementary schools.
Things like Project Lead the Way, NESS, I believe,
Project O,
Project O.
Connecticut
Yeah.
Science Center.
Yeah.
And then that third initiative was implementing IBCP, which is International Baccalaureate career related programming at the high school, and then expansion of Project Lead the Way. It's really kind of exciting. We've got, if you look at it, a complete engineering pathway in Groton Public Schools. Catherine Kolnaski as a STEAM magnet. We've been using Engineering as Elementary, which is an elementary engineering curriculum for a number of years as part of our magnet theme, K through 5. And now with Project Lead the Way Gateway at Groton Middle School and the grant providing opportunities for the expansion at Fitch to include 3 classes currently and possibly a 4th, is what I've been told. So we've really kind of got that, a student could enter in kindergarten and really take engineering or be exposed to engineering all the way through, which is pretty exciting. The grant has continued to train Fitch staff in that IBCP program and really kind of created the infrastructure for those career pathways to be created. And so that brings us to where we are now as we look at year 5 and sustainability, and thinking about sustainability and using kind of this last bucket of money in the grant to continue these initiatives, and really looking at it 3 ways. Building culture as a way to maintain programs, buying materials, pre-buying materials where we can make that happen, and continuing to build teacher skills and professional learning. I feel like if we invest in those 3 areas, we can keep a lot of these initiatives going. So just specifically about that, we will continue to revise our K1 and 2 curriculums, much like we did the 3, 4, and 5 over the summer. So that work will be ongoing throughout this year. We're going to look at pre-buying materials for Project Lead the Way at the high school to the extent that we can, to make sure that we keep that program moving forward. Continuing to send Fitch High School staff to IBCP programming workshops to continue to build that infrastructure. And then an opportunity that we have, COVID really kind of shut down after school programs to the extent that we used to do them prior to COVID. So we have an opportunity to use some of this money to kind of rebuild that, whether it's through professional learning in STEM after school programs or the purchasing of materials to support those after school programs. So we're really looking forward, over this last year to make sure that all the good things that have happened, we're able to sustain those and maintain those.
And I would say also that having the next STEM grant, which Val is overseeing, and Val Nelson is a great mentor, as Ben kind of came in for the final year. But that one is a STEM careers grant, K-12. So looking at STEM careers across, so that's only going to strengthen, and that goes on for the next 4 years. So That's also part of the sustainability plan. When we go to create the next ODIAs, we're looking back before we look forward to see what are the needs. So we make sure that we're putting that into the next grant. So there's a lot of thought behind these as we develop them. So thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. I just wanted to. Perfect.
Do we have questions for Ben? Dean?
So from a finance point of view, we're gonna go from one, to like a trapeze that, one to another, or we're going from grant to funding our operations.
I think it's a mix.
It's a mix.
I really do. And we've
Yeah.
started to look at those numbers. You know, there's certain, thinking off the top of my head, there's like a software platform that we paid for out of the grant that after this year we won't need, right? So that's something we won't continue to fund. But there may be things that, you know, we might have to build, you know, gather the evidence for and build the case if we want to keep them.
I think a good example is the partnerships. We really are believers. We always have been. Even when I got here, we had every grade level had some kind of an assured experience, and it tended to be more scientific, you know, science related, whether it was life science or, you know, engineering kind of science. So we've always been a partner with Project O. Through the grants, we've been able to expand that partnership, but we do have funds in the operating budget that secures the Project O partnership. So I think it's really a combination. We have some areas in operations, but we've been able to enhance it through the grants and continue it maybe through another grant and through operations. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle.
You know, one was, I just thought of it, so I apologize. It jumped in with two questions. It's all good. What's done? How do we know that the program actually does anything? Just to put it very bluntly, is there a way that we measure the success? You know, what for the program, whether it's grant or operational fund, but for the program, the kids would be like this. We'd have this, whatever that measurement, whatever that baseline is. Because of the program, we are, however you want to qualify and quantify it.
Yeah.
What's the other than it looks good, and I'm sure it's meant well. What's the result? Do we know yet? Do we have a metric for that?
So there's a lot of work that goes into a grant, and an evaluation piece is instrumental in deciding what the evaluation piece is. It's usually something that is both very numbers wise, looking at data, and also getting information from our constituents on how effective they feel it is. So from the soft to the hard data, we're looking at that all the time. We actually have meetings quarterly with Department of Defense education activity folks. We have an evaluator that's an outside person that we pay for through the grant that does the objective evaluation piece and takes in all the information. So we set goals and standards, many of them in these, and we monitor them continuously. So we are able to see the positive effect. What's happened from most of these DODIA grants, because we have to measure military students versus the whole population. Military students have had great success in our district. And even before we were getting DODIA grants, they were very successful. But so are all of our students. We've seen measured success and growth from our students. COVID has come in. We know we kind of took a hit a little bit, but we're going to gain and continue to gain. And I have to say that the love of science and the love of reading and writing are what I see too. The kids it's generated this real enthusiasm and engagement for the kids. But that's just soft data. But we look at both the soft and the hard data. We look at the numbers and we measure it. We look for the progress. And it's not only us measuring ourselves. We have this outside evaluator that has been hired to look at it. And then we do reports every year, annually, quarterly, I think, reports. I guess you'll find out all about that. So we do have all that information if anybody ever wanted to see. at the end of a grant, what has gone into it. We just finished up the math grant, so we have a final report on that.
I'm a product of holy crap, Sputnik. When I went to school, that was the US's job overall was, we gotta crank out more engineers and scientists because we gotta meet the lessons. So what's our expectation for this one? That we're gonna graduate more people going to engineering school, sciences, or people who are not gonna go to the engineering science, just become more scientifically literate, we're gonna improve our math scores, or what is our expectation?
Well, I think really initially our expectation was, how are we going to do this massive job of, we had Connecticut core standards, Common Core for ELA and math, and we had the next generation science standards come in. How are we going to make sure that our students are scientifically literate as well, all of them? And yes, careers are important to see a multitude of different career pathways. So, that was the focus. That was what was given to us in that particular grant. This next one we're getting is a world language, so that will be the focus. But it just, it's not saying every student is going to be a scientist, but it says that, it'll improve the engagement while they're going to school and learning about science too,
And I would
even if
think
they don't become a scientist.
And certainly watching the data as the kids move up to the middle school and into the high school as to how many kids are following that engineering pathway would be a data point
Yeah.
that we can see
Yeah.
the effectiveness of the program.
And I think at the elementary level too, and we've talked about this as a STEAM and STEM-based magnet school, like one of the reasons to include this type of programming at an early age is to, a lot of kids start to make decisions about what they feel like they're good at, like pretty early. Like there's research that's cited often, like third grade, is when kids start to make those initial impressions, like I could be this or I could be that. So, providing these opportunities for kids really early gives some kids a chance to say, hey, actually, this might be my thing, right? I might be good at this.
I think we've all had experience in knowing people who decided very early, usually in elementary school, I'm no good at.
Right.
Exactly the other side.
And
That's-
they go
yeah.
another direction. My brother's is an artist. He found out in college, he was actually much better at math than he thought and was told all through school. You're an artist, ergo, forget the math and the science. He was much better at it and had more of an interest than he thought. So I applaud that.
Is it safe to say that one of the data points that we would have would be to look at, and I think, Matthew, you were alluding, like our third metric, right, which is to look at our science scores and to see whether the more intentional embedding of the NGSS will, I guess the other hand to that would be, we would have increased scores in the science.
I'm all for scientific literature. When I went to college as an engineer, they made me take humanities courses to round me out. The humanities people didn't have to take any tech courses to round them out because, math block.
Right.
I think everybody ought to have some more of a basic education for really getting, I think.
Well, we're trying pre-K through 12 to give them a well-rounded education for sure.
I'm going to recognize Rita.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to ask Ben if we're still using science kits in our elementary grades for our science classes.
We have kits in science that support the science curriculum that we've adopted. So it's a different, the materials are still useful and the materials are still able to support, but it's a different model than the kit-based curriculum that we had in the past.
So we're no longer having to rotate them around to different schools and have them refilled constantly?
No.
Correct.
So how are the chemicals? I mean, how do you do that? Who's in charge of that? Are you, Ben?
Well, it's building based.
It's
At this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting there as far as kind of getting a handle on what materials need to be replenished on a unit by unit basis. But in general, buildings take care of those science needs out of their budgets.
Right.
Oh, okay. And do you know at all about how many times a week our students have science in school, our elementary? It seemed like they were always switching off between social studies and science when I felt they needed both every day. But I don't know whether or not that it's being taught every day anymore, science.
I would say in science and social studies, they built these units of study that are done more holistically. So it's better to concentrate on one at a time. So usually within each quarter, they're getting a science and a social studies. But they're done as units of study with comprehensive assessments and projects that they've developed. So it just makes more sense for the kids instead of being disjointed. We're even looking in our latest grant that takes reading and writing across the disciplines to also incorporate it in our reading and writing instruction as well.
Well, I mean,
So-
social studies is perfect for that. So, as Liz.
Well,
knows.
and there's scientific writing, we've actually involved,
scientifically.
in doing lab reporting and researching and that kind of thing. So it's a different kind of writing, but it's certainly something that is a valuable skill.
Well, the more science and social studies I feel need to be included for our elementary, because I think it's been lacking for a long time. Too much focus is just on math and reading, when I think we could stimulate our children, especially in both science and social studies, as a former social studies teacher.
Well, that's our goal, is especially with these units they've developed. They've done some pretty exciting work. Next time we'll have someone to come and talk about the social studies.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to recognize Matthew.
Well, I've been wrestling well before tonight's presentation with the difference between measuring outcomes in terms of scores and measuring outcomes in terms of, for lack of a scientific word, practical intended learning outcomes. And I'm very ignorant of what we're doing. I'm too new on the board to really know all of what we're doing. But it's my hope as we start the new grant that we'll have two types of metrics that we look at, or maybe more than two. One being the scores that we have for standardized scores, which are important, but also to have some goals with waypoints. We're not going to get everything at once, but with some very clear waypoints at the end of one semester. This particular skill set should be demonstrable, as well as looking at the scores. It's just a personal hope, and if I'm off base, just smile at me and go however you want.
Well, I was hoping I had communicated that, because that's exactly what Department of Defense Education Activity is really looking for, is to have multiple measures, not just number measures, but looking at all kinds of data and gathering that to see if it's been effective
Well, thank you.
from all kinds of viewpoints, not
It's gonna
just
take you a
ours.
little more work to work on these.
No, but thank you for stating that point again, because that was really, it's important to us.
I am just wondering if I can go back to Dean's point. Your original point is in terms of looking at finance. In that as we are rapidly approaching January, where we really take a look at the budget, given the fact that this is year 5, is if the board, because we are very soon after that are going to need to sort of present our board to the other bodies, and it's their right to know about this grant has ended and this is sort of what we are doing and this is the pieces of our budget. And so to make sure that that is clear, so people like me who don't understand numbers, I can have a sense of being able to talk to the budget about that.
So Ben has come in just at the right time. We meet periodically with Ken Knight and Lori, and Val, I think, has been part of that, to really chart out numerically what it's going to take to kind of sustain this grant. And moving forward, are there pieces that we need to incorporate in operations or the other grant? So that's the exact work that you do in the 5th year. You kind of do it all through the 5 years, but this time we really are taking a serious look at how we sustain this moving forward. So we will definitely share that with the board.
Thank you. Any further questions about our work with Ben?
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. It's been a long time. So let us move on to the discussion about Lexia Rapid. I just really like that name. Feels like it's never, I'm not gonna say what I was gonna come out about, like a star, right? Lexia Rapid. Yeah,
Or
movie
character
star?
badly written novel.
or
Right.
or really a character, really badly written novel. You're right, Dean. Someday I'll grow up. I just won't be today.
I apologize, guys, my computer's giving me issues. Hold on a second.
And it's new. It's a new computer.
That's the problem, it's a new computer that's never shared anything on you for.
Oh,
So I never set up.
do we need to give you permission? No.
No.
So, Jay and Liz and Rita, just to let you know, we have Tom and we also have Amy McKenna here. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, it was in our board notes. They were coming.
Yep, I just want to let you know they are here, present and accounted for.
Yeah, we could see. Yeah.
What? He said someone read your board notes. I said, I'm so excited.
I read the warrant.
See it on my end.
Taking its time to load.
Rita, can you see it on your end?
I don't see it, but I have it printed.
Okay.
It still says loading.
Yep. it's
It
still
feels like that's
loading.
my life. Loading.
Can you send it to Phil and have
No,
him-
I haven't. I could, let me see if I can.
I'm just saying you two have apples. Just saying.
Yeah, it's more than an apple.
All right, guys.
What does it say, Tom Lonsdale?
I started screen sharing and yet.
Did you stop screen sharing? Oh, there you are.
Now we have Phil on. That's right. That's right. I have mine.
Yeah. It's. Let me try it.
Tom, if you stop sharing, he can try it.
Yeah. So. There you go. I don't know why that worked. Thank you, Phil.
Backup. You always need a wingman.
Right?
Or woman.
Exactly. All right, so, this presentation really came out of our discussion with FMP data, which we discussed previously.
And FMP
So-
stands for?
Fonz and Fennell. So
Thank
if you
you.
remember, we looked at Fonz and Fennell data, which is our elementary reading assessment. We wanted to look further up, and then the board shared their desire to look further up. So this is looking at 6 through 10, I believe, is the highest grade level that we assessed using this that we're sharing tonight. So 6 through 10 reading data. So this assessment is a very different format. So we are going to discuss the format of this assessment versus the Fonz and Fennell assessment. It is broken down into 4 major components, and Amy, maybe you can speak better to these than I can. But the 4 major components of this assessment are word recognition, vocabulary knowledge, syntactic knowledge, and reading comprehension. The first 3 kind of building all the way up to that reading comprehension, which is kind of the most complex skill that the students are taking on in this assessment. So we're looking at them individually, each component of this test that is assessed, and we get a score reported on. And then we're looking at kind of at the end that comprehension score overall. So the first is a word recognition task. That's the first piece of this assessment that the students interact with. So I'm not going to read this, but basically this gives you a description of what the student is actually doing in this portion. So we can look at the data for 6 to 8 first. And Matthew, you'll notice there's a number included just for you with the number of students who took the assessment. I remember what you said at the last meeting about our Fonz and Fennell, so that is added. So you can see this is the number of students who were at or above grade level at 3 different times, so fall, winter, and spring. So this was given last school year. There are windows that the students are assessed in fall, winter, and spring. So you can see this is not a exact cohorts. This is just the number of students who took it during the school year. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I apologize.
It's a
So
rough-
the N, it is a cohort because the N only includes students who took all 3 assessments. So for this, it's 257 students in grade 6 took all 3. So you'll notice that we do have more than 257 students in grade 6, but many of them did not take all 3 assessments. So to keep this consistent, we're just giving you who took all 3 assessments. Okay. So as you can see, we do see overall a general trend of the scores increasing from the fall to winter to the spring, which is overall very positive. Again, it's just the first metric. Next, we have grades 9 and 10. So again, the same setup with fall and spring. This test is only administered 2 times at grades 9 and 10. So a slight decrease from fall to spring, and that is not a typo. They are actually the exact same percentages for grades 9 and grades 10. But overall, this test does get progressively harder to move.
So it is a different test. They're not taking the same. It's not like a pre and a post.
Correct.
It's different times of year and different level of expectation. So it becomes more difficult across the year.
So the second component of this test, remember it's a 4-component test, is the vocabulary knowledge task. Again, this is a description of what the students actually encountering on there. So here we see much greater variation between the grades between the fall, winter, and spring assessments. Again, these are cohorted. So your 6th graders from 66% of students in the fall scoring out of a grade level to 77. We do have a slight decrease from 92% in the fall in grade 7 down to 87% by the spring administration. And again, from 88% in grade 8 down to 85% in the administration. With the Lexi Rapid Assessment Vocabulary Knowledge for 9 and 10, a similar setup. So from 83 to 84%, again with 275 in the cohort for grade 9, and from 90 down to 89% proficiency in grade 10.
Amy, how did you feel about the scores so far? Because I thought that was a really large percentage of kids who met or exceeded the goal in these areas.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like it's difficult when you're looking at the bar graph and you see that little dip. But when you think about the time that goes in and the fact that the test progressively gets harder because it's adaptive. So every time a student begins doing well, the questions just shift into another question bracket and it gets harder as they go along. Then I look at data like that and I feel pretty good about it, to be quite honest.
I did too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead. I'm going to recognize Matthew and then I'll do William.
So the numbers on the surface look fine. I guess my question, please don't duck under the desks. Is it possible to do multiple regression analysis on this data to see how this corresponds to student performance overall? We don't need to know the names of the students, but where are the struggling students? Is that all really correlated? And what is that information does they give you as educators or us as the board insight as to how we can help those who are not performing at grade level?
We can certainly do it. I am worried that this is too much of a snapshot to be able to mirror it to something else, but we can certainly look. I would love to see this mirrored to our Smarter Balance scores originally and see if there's an analysis there between correlation, but we can try that, Matthew, and look at that next time, certainly.
Well, I'm not asking for it. I'm asking if you think it's worth doing. Because I'm not.
I don't know if it's necessarily, one thing we can talk about is this assessment unfortunately is going away after the school year. So this is an assessment we can really use in the future. That being said, I do think it's valid to start looking at whether all of these assessments do give us kind of an accurate idea of what the outcomes are for our students on other metrics. Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that what your question is?
Yes.
And I would say that on a school data team and also the district data team, those are the kind of analyses that we're looking at. We're trying to look at multiple assessments and see how our kids are doing.
Recognize William and then Andrea.
So to piggyback on what Matthew was saying is the data on who's actually participating, the demographics, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. We always say that it's not just saying about it, it's actually about acting on it. And so that's what we really need. But more importantly, 213 students for grade 10. What are the demographics? What are the data on those that didn't take it? You know, are we missing
Or
out?
didn't finish it.
Or didn't finish it. I mean, the other thing too is again, this is cohorted, so it might be a student who took one or the other. We do have relatively high transiency, so that could have been an issue there as well.
Our grade 10, now grade 11 is actually a smaller grade too. If there's 250, I mean, there's still a decent amount of kids that didn't take it, but there's 250 right now that are in that grade. So although that number looks small, it's a smaller grade than the other grades.
I think the other difficult thing the high school has to contend with that's different than the middle school, that spring administration fell in the same time frame as their finals administration. And with some students being up with COVID, I think it was kind of you're choosing one or the other. Does the student, do a makeup final, or are they doing a makeup Lexi? And I think at that point, I get it. They were choosing kind of the final at that point.
The test window was in the month of May, and then prepping them for finals takes place during the month of May for the final exam in June. So it did become an issue, especially for students that were out for COVID. It became a prioritization issue because for many students, this was their first final exam ever, for the sophomores especially, or their first exam in a very long time. So we did have to sort of be cognizant of the fact that if they had been out, perhaps the priority wasn't the reading test, but to prepare them for the 8 exams that they were heading into in mid-June.
But to your point about kind of digging a little bit deeper and looking at demographic breakdowns, we absolutely like to do that. I think my only struggle with this data set is because there are 4 subtests, you're getting into just a lot of data points to look at right away. I think if we're looking kind of holistically at what the overall scores were, absolutely makes sense to start breaking it down. I just didn't want to throw 30 graphs at you guys in one presentation.
Or even just look at the reading comprehension, which is really their understanding of what they've read.
Absolutely.
Andrea? You kind of touched on the questions that I was going to ask, and that is, I really wanted to know how many students, 257 or 75, I'm sorry, out of how many, and then after that, why would, and you kind of answered that in a way, why didn't the others take the test? And now that you've said maybe why, my question is, how do you put a student in a place where, and I don't mean you, Amy,
No, it's fine.
how does you put in a student in a place where the student has to choose between, I'm going to take a final or a makeup, whatever that was, and make up this. I mean,
Yeah, at the end of the month of May, that we didn't put them in a choice. There wasn't a choice. We closed the testing window, and the students were preparing for their final exams. We didn't say, well, you can prepare for your final, or you can take your Lexi or Rapid.
no, I didn't mean that. I
Okay,
meant, like,
sorry.
How do we get into a place where, while you weren't telling them to do it, that it was in a place where that kind of thing was making an effect on whether they took it or not?
Oh, I see your point. I think that when we were looking at like the testing windows, like they're established in certain sections, we tried to keep our Lexia Rapid testing window far away from like any other types of testing that are going on. So we have the mid-March test. We certainly could move the testing window back a little bit, but May is a month when you don't have an April break. And we would like to see a consistent month where there are no long breaks, because I also thought it would affect our test sample if we had some students in the sophomore and freshman class testing before April break and then some students testing after April break, because then I think we have a validity issue. So it really is a really tough call, Dr. Ackerman, for sure, with the timing, and I'm really open to your feedback. So I appreciate you mentioning
And
that.
then COVID on top of it, 'cause
Sure.
kids were coming and going and having, 5 to 7 days out if they had COVID.
And they took the SAT, whether it be the PSAT or the SAT, they took that late March. So to have them take that and then, right after that, start taking the
I
Lexi.
have one follow-up question then. So in the beginning, everybody started out, but then only 275 ended? Is that what I'm saying?
I think that was the total number that completed the test.
That completed the test
Both,
twice.
yes, I completed
All
both.
three.
Both tests.
So everybody in the class took the Lexia?
Yes, you tested all core in English 9 and English 10, all core, all students that took core.
And just for perspective, that I'm looking at our grade 10 now, not that they're the same numbers that we had grade 9. the population's 273. So
Oh,
for it to be at 275 is pretty
I see.
amazing.
That's not the impression that I got when you said that. I thought there was like a whole bunch that didn't do it. But that's not what you're saying.
No.
No, it's limited.
But that would be good to know how many.
Dean,
I don't expect that there's an answer to this, but it's something that I'm wondering about. And we've experienced it, all of us when we went through school, which is this. Some assessments, tests, quizzes, there's a stake. If you're conscientious, there's a stake. Boy, I better do well on this. Kids walk into almost anything and they don't really care, you know, they just let it fly. But I expect most students are thinking, no, I need a good grade on this. Something like this doesn't really affect them personally. This is just something that they're being given, hey, you've got to take this, but they must realize there's no stake. They don't have a stake in the result. So this would apply to all places, all times. Do we have any information on how students perform? Realize that there's a stake, and when they think they have no stake in the outcome. You know, for some things you'll study, other things you won't. Are they tested cold? It's got to make a difference. If you think about it, because we're talking about it's apples and oranges, but we assess people like when we give them finals. They have a stake in that one. And we assess them with something like this, sort of an interim. They have no stake in it. So do we know whether people do better when they think they have a stake in it? Does it make no difference? I guess this would be for people who study child psychology.
I would say anecdotally, there's not a massive difference. And the reason I say that is because the most high stakes assessment I think we give is our SATs, right? I mean, I think those have kind of a long-term value to students and scores. We give our proficiency rates on SATs roughly mirror the other assessments that we see. And if your hypothesis is correct, that only, you know, students will outperform on students where they have, or it doesn't say have a vested stake, we would see kind of weights significantly higher than this, right? So because they mirror, I think that largely speaking, our students are putting in a good faith effort on the assessment.
That's sort of the word of the mouth. Take the test. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
But I thought, Dean, that we were doing, that this was a macro test for the benefit of the administration and the teaching profession, so we could see how we could up our game. As
That's
opposed-
true. So I guess my follow-up would be, what's more useful if you were to say, compare students across the years, across the grade using their final grades in various topics, or these assessments where they don't think they have anything at stake? What's the real measurement of what's going on with the kids?
I would say the greater value, I would say the greater value is actually at the micro level. I think it's useful for us to sit and be able to analyze kind of our overall performance, but I think for those individual students, be able to meet them where they are, I think that's where the stat is really valuable. For the Fitch team and the GMS team to be able to intervene with students who truly need it, be able to get a really detailed view of this is where the student's at, these are the skills they're struggling with, and here as a professional, here's how I'm going to help them. To me, that's much more valuable than any of this macro data.
So am I understanding you to say that while you're presenting the aggregate data, that when you get the test scores, you find that Tanisha or Tom or whomever is doing well or poorly, that this data is shared with the individual teachers?
Oh,
And with
yeah.
individual.
Yeah, that's-
And then intervention happens.
Okay.
So you have formative, and summative assessments, and we break both of those things down to inform our instruction, but also to help support our kids with interventions that they might need.
But to spend the time to discuss it with the kid, once you have that conversation with the kid about the test, they're gonna buy into that test a lot more as well. Because you've actually spent the time to look at it with them and determine if there are intervention plans that need to be made and so forth.
That's good, thank you.
So I think that this is our third data points in tactic knowledge task. And again, overall, we see really high kind of levels of students scoring at or above grade level average. But overall, with this one, really solid growth throughout the year. 8th grade staying really steady throughout the year, even though the test is getting harder. So overall, very solid growth, 6, 7, 8. And 9 and 10, again, the data is very similar. Overall, just really solid proficiency rates. So as I discussed, kind of those first 3 components, maybe I'll speak to this too, really build together to kind of, if you think about it, almost placing a student as to what kind of reading comprehension passage they're gonna get, right? So those first three components together kind of approximate where they think the student should be, so they can get that reading test. Because remember, again, this is an adaptive test, so every student on there is not getting the same reading passage. It's trying to give them a reading passage where they think the level of the student is, which may not always be perfect, right? It's not always gonna perfectly place it, but it's gonna try to give them an assessment that, or a passage that matches them so they can assess them at that level.
It's not your grandfather's reading test. It's not your own reading test. It's really a new way of developing so that we know what prior data is giving us, so that we better adjust the type of assessment piece that the kids will be able to perform on.
Yeah, and again, just to give you the range, sorry, you don't have to backfill, but the range, I mean, you're talking 200 words versus 1,300 words. There's a very large range, not only in length, but complexity to what a student might get. So when Amy's talking about the variability in those scores overall, that's why a student may get a very different passage the second time they take this assessment, just based on how they've done the first, those first three components. So we do see lower overall proficiency rates in reading comprehension. That's not surprising, just given the inherent nature of the test. Instead of having to focus on one specific skill task, they're focusing on, really reading all together. They're not only having to comprehend, they're having to do that vocabulary work, they're having to look at that syntactic knowledge all together. So it's a much more complex task. Therefore, we would expect to see lower overall proficiency rates.
Sure, and depending on how well you're scoring, the test will get harder and harder. And by the time you get to the reading comprehension section, you're really in that last phase of the test. However, if you begin to get tired and you start guessing, you'll confuse the test and the test will get longer. So students get anywhere between 2 and 3 passages on this section of the test. And this is where we find, when we're in the room proctoring and when we look at our scores, probably fatigue has come in to play. Stamina has come into play. And students will say, I've never read about this type of scientific topic before. Of course, I'm not remembering any for the live reading, but they'll say, well, I never read about that topic before. And then when we think about how we instruct in reading, what do we do? What are some of those great scaffolding things we do? We have students tap into prior knowledge and so many other things that help them be powerful readers. But when you're taking a test like this cold, some of those things, those strategies that you've been taught in K through 12 really are not strategies that now you can draw into. The test just wants to know, how can you do on this one question in the moment? And if you get tired and start clicking, it will get longer. So you can imagine being 12, 13, 14, and 15 taking this test on a warm May day. You have to consider the students in the room. So even though, well, we're in the 60s, that's all right. When you look at it, you say, well, the other 3 sections were easier. The other 3 sections were multiple choice and quicker and easier. And in the beginning, we asked Lexia if we could take our reading comp. I said, can we pilot? So I talked to the representatives often. Can we pilot the reading comprehension section first? So no, our test doesn't look like that. Because I was curious. I was very curious. Because sometimes what I see isn't necessarily consistent with what we're showing here. Because I see in rooms a lot of growth and a lot of curiosity and a lot of great reading strategies at play. So just for your consideration.
So then, why are we doing this?
And actually, one of the things that we've actually built with the Division of the Graduate, which Amy did a great job helping us put together when she was leading the DS team, was resiliency. And having one of the things we're doing in order to support that is making sure that we're giving students feedback. And so sharing these results with the students and knowing, okay, this is where you are and this is where you need to be. And talking about those test taking strategies and being able to get through, that tough part of the test and so on and so forth. But also like, okay, how are you going to build your reading comprehension? So these again, as I was saying, this is kind of the overall scores, but really that work with the individual student on how they're doing. Okay, does this student need intervention? Does this student need extra work within their class? Is a student doing great and needs to be challenged? All those things these data points help us gather those on our individual students. So
I know I didn't, what can you recognize? I apologize.
Can I ask a follow-up? If we, and I understand what you said, Ted, but the crux of my question is, if we know students are tired, and if we're putting them in a place where they're not going to succeed, then what's the value of the, even if we get results, they're not accurate. So why are we using this? It's a particular
You wanna
one.
start?
I don't know if I would say that they're not accurate. I would say that I think that fatigue does come into play, but then when we look at it holistically and think about every learner in the room, sometimes I always wonder, how will we catch and really know who can read at level? And I do think that rapid, it's a universal screener. And it's one of those things that helps us identify, and it's not the only data point, but it's a data point that contributes to us being able to identify students for that SRBI process. And I do think that that is one of the reasons why we have been using this universal screener. I think we're going into our third year currently.
I also, just to add on that, I think it's, those numbers are very similar to our performance on the PSAT. If you look at the total percentage that reach benchmark, I'd say it's pretty darn close.
2/3.
And you think about those, that's a long test. They're gonna lose they lose the resiliency while they're taking that test. I think that's another, but yeah, I mean, so it is comparable, I would argue. And then the second thing, the resource, they provide resources at that level of wherever the student is. They got a certain score. And this
Here's what you do.
this is,
Yeah, but as I look at the data, the hard data, it's surprising, the difference in the levels. And it seems to me that the real issue is that the interference of being tired. That's what it seems, from what I'm hearing and what I'm looking at.
That, and it's a much more complex section of the test.
Yeah.
The first sections are
new
one
knowledge.
sentence, one
Right.
word,
Right.
so on and so forth. This is a huge, I mean, again, to have a student read a 1,000 word paragraph and then have to answer questions about it, that's a much more complex task.
And that's my point.
Just watch. Thank you, I appreciate that.
And moving forward, they will need that. I mean, Matt made the point about the SATs, but then, additionally, when they, go into our high levels in their AP courses, they're sitting for 2 and 3 hour, and so in some cases, 3 1/4 hour tests. And there are multiple reading comprehension sections for different content areas. So certainly, I think building reading stamina is a big deal that we constantly try to work on for reading for enjoyment, but sometimes it has to be when you're reading for challenge as well. And across genre, I think that's another thing as well.
So, Amy, I've appreciated your comment on the order. You haven't given some thought to maybe inverting giving it. The same thought was in my mind. I'm not quite sure I understand why it's not possible, but I trust your judgment. You know more than I do.
So, sorry. So when Amy brought this up, I actually read the technical manual for the assessment. The reason is because the first 2 components build and are the placement mechanism for the reading comprehension test. So because they need that to go to place the students, that's why it has to go first. I know that
So
sounds.
can we
that's
give
just
them
how
a
they do
break
it.
after we do the first 3 and give them 40 minutes? to
We
play
do
outside?
test over 2 sessions. They take the first, they test for 30 minutes and they get on with their day, go to another class, and then the next time they go back to their ELA or their English class, and they test. We do test in 2 sessions, which is what Lexia recommends.
My concern when I saw this at home, I went, holy potato pancakes. We have between 41% and 41%, depending on the class, the low grade level, in each of these 5 grade cohorts. 41% to 21%. And I'm just wondering, why is this happening? Who is it happening to? Is this one of the unintended equity issues that we're very sensitive to? Or that's why I asked the question about regression analysis, because I'm worried that we are unintentionally somehow not being optimal in serving the kids. And this is not a reproach. This is a struggle for your opinion.
No, absolutely. I think that as this team has talked about, this is just one data point that helps them really identify students who are struggling. And it just becomes a piece of that SRBI and intervention puzzle for them. I just wanted to say, I don't ever look at one data point and say that 40% of our kids aren't reading at grade level, for example. Now, it is an alarming metric, and it would make me pause and think, who are those 40% of children? We need to look at individually at every single one of those kids and see where they're at. But I know this team is looking at curriculum-based assessments and other metrics, to determine, is that truly where the student is? And there are students who are struggling and absolutely need support, but that's why they have an intervention process and an SRBI model to be able to support those kids.
You have to look at multiple data, like you had suggested early on. You can't just take one piece of data and say that this child can or can't do something based on that one piece of data.
Where I was going with this is we're making a great effort, and I mean that not in volume, but in quality, to challenge the kids with higher level courses. And if we're having this type of reading, if this reading comprehension metric is accurate, how are those kids who are in that thing going to survive and thrive in these challenging courses we're having? It's a rhetorical question. It's just one I ask myself.
Well, again, I don't see it as a rhetorical question. I see it as that's when you need core plus more. That's the students are in that core class and they're getting in the intervention or whatever else they need in order to, because you need that catch up time. And right now we've got, it's not just in reading, it's across the board. With COVID, we've got a lot of kids that need catch up. And so, how are we providing that to the students? How are we identifying them and how are we providing that? So, when we talk about a student that we say, okay, we got this data point, we've seen other data points that says this kid's struggling. Okay, do they need to get into that intervention? Do we need to do something with their teacher? What do we need to do in order to help that kid catch up? Because that's really what it comes down to.
I totally agree with you. I just don't know what we do to set waypoints. If we want to go from, I'm looking at the sixth graders, if we want to go from 64% to 80% or 64 to 85 or 75, that's the weeds, you guys have to focus on that. But what are the waypoints? How do we do there? What does this data let us structure beyond the words intervention? I mean, how do we measure our success of the intervention over time? I look forward to working.
Yeah, I think, I was just gonna say, I think it'd be an interesting future conversation. We're gonna start looking at not just achievement growth of our individual students. And I think that's really the conversation you're looking for, is how much of our students are growing, right? So it's
That's
not
how
just,
much they look at.
yeah, absolutely. So it's not just about level or achievement, are you at grade level or not? Are we moving kids kind of throughout that spectrum? So I know we're prepared, preparing to come to you at a future board meeting and talk about our smarter balance results. A big part of that will be the growth in reading PLA. I'd be happy to have that conversation.
And looking at the cohorts,
Absolutely.
looking at that grade 6 performed at that last year, how are they doing this year?
Exactly.
Is there any, instead of just saying, oh, they're at 64%. Well, were they at 60% last year? And now, so really doing the cohort now, it's exciting that we can kind of get back to it, because I've missed it for a few years here as being a math person.
So if pretending that the grade 10 was grade 12, just for an argument, or whatever the true number happens to be for grade 12, if we have 15, 20, 25, whatever the percentage is of graduating seniors who are still not reading on grade level, what does that mean for them going forward? What does that mean for us getting them ready to go forward? Sorry, I don't expect an answer, but that's the word.
That's the work. That's absolutely the work.
I would recognize Dean and then you. Dean.
All right, I do know that I have 2 questions. So the reading comprehension task is not the same for all.
No.
Being assessed. Has to run between 200 to 1,500 words in length, but the data is aggregated as with people taking the exact, undergoing the exact assessment. Is it, in other words, so when you say, for example, 67% at or above grade level, within this bar, some kids have had the 200 word passage, some the 1,300 word passage. So kind of apples and oranges, or apples, different kinds of apples?
Not necessarily. I mean, think about it like this. If the goal is to be reading at a 9th grade level, right? You're gonna have some readers who are reading at a 12th grade level. They've taken that 1,300 word assessment or 1,300 word reading comprehension test. They still count for us as being reading at or above grade level, right? So does a kid who's reading right at grade level, at 9th grade. The students who are below also could have a really similar spread. You could have a student reading at an 8th grade level who doesn't count for us, or a student reading at a 2nd grade level who doesn't count for us. So it's really, to your point, it is different, but it's really just looking at one kind of standard. Are they meeting the grade level or not?
Second question I have is, our sample sizes are our sample sizes. Not everybody's sample sizes. There's the population, or as close as we can get to the population. And if you're looking at, for example, year-to-year comparisons, our 6th grade becomes 7th grade becomes 8th grade. You don't expect to see the same kids. You're already saying here that the N equals a certain number. And these are the kids who've taken all 3 or both, depending on your how many tests you have or how many assessments you have in that particular year. So say grade 7 becomes grade 8. You're not going to get the same 285 kids in grade 8. You're not going to get the same kids taking all 3. So it becomes difficult. You're not going to get precisely the same comparisons. When grade 7 becomes grade 8 and you assess them again, you can't say how did they do how did they do in the year before, unless your sample size, your population size is sufficiently large where you can ignore the internal variations. Do we know, it's a question of physics, do we know that these numbers are large enough so we can ignore the fact that there's going to be variations in the individuals? What's a sufficiently large number to ignore that? 1 million, yes, that's
That's way too small.
It's too small, right? So when we say, when grade 7 becomes grade 8, and we say, okay, what did grade 8 do this year? What did they do last year? Wouldn't be accurate to compare their numbers then.
With the value being comparing the numbers of the individual kid that did do it in grade 7, grade 8, and that's where the value of all of this really.
Kid level, yes.
Yeah.
Kid level, I agree with you. We can identify Tom, he did this, then he did that, he's doing better, he's doing worse, he's doing the same. But on the whole, from our point of view, how are we doing? How are the grades doing as they move through? It's not accurate to say that 7, when it becomes 8, will show similar or even better numbers to show that we really don't know because the sample is too small.
Correct. That's how the state is measuring.
Well, with the state, we do match cohort. So when we look at the SBAC data together, the next one, I'd say, we can look at matched cohort growth. So we can look at who was with us last year and those same students, how are they doing this year. That will lower the sample size again to your point, but at least then we're looking, you're at the same group of students, even though it might be 250, 300 students. So that in that regard is the same as that.
Thank you. William.
So speaking of the state, what is other state and national benchmarks for each grade?
So generally with the state of Connecticut right now, we're looking at Smarter Balance, math, and ELA. And then we are also looking at the MGSS test that Ben had alluded to earlier, which is the science test, that is the state test.
So with Lexia, I don't know if they give you like a benchmark or an average nationally. They don't do it in every school. You really opt in to do this kind of an assessment. And it's really just a checkpoint. It's kind of a universal screener that we give kids to see if there are outliers. And with that data, we're able to see who we need to give support to, maybe even enrichment to. It shows us kind of both ways.
If you're referring,
but it's not the only assessment, certainly, that we do.
no, but if you're looking more like a norm reference assessment, that would be Smart Balance and the MGSS, which we'll be looking at, I would say, probably next month.
Actually, probably the end of this month.
Oh, sorry, the end of this one. Did that answer your question?
Did I hear someone say that, I think Amy, you said that we're not using the Lexia Rapid?
Lexia is retiring the rapid tests at
So
the
we're
end of
looking
this
for something
academic
else.
year. So we've been researching
Yeah.
along with other coordinators, building administrators in those buildings.
we'd like something like this because it's 30 minutes, so it doesn't take a lot of time from the kids. And it gives us information that we need to help to support them. So we're looking for something that's rapid.
Do you know why they retired it?
Costs a lot of money to
Renorm it.
to renorm a test, and they do not want to go through that comprehensive study. It's not worth it to them financially. At this,
Any other questions? You guys, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It's so nice to see you guys again around a table.
It's coming back, coming back.
But thank you so much. And board, I thought that the questions were
Yeah.
really great and insightful and they're great. Thank you.
It's good to be back in person again to just have a conversation about these things, you know?
Thank you. All right, our next thing on the agenda is the Alliance Tracker feedback.
And I know I have probably said this way too many times, either through board notes, probably mostly through board notes, but we did have our, you know, with being an Alliance district, even though they wanted to graduate us, they do give us a lot of support, and we meet with our state representatives from the Connecticut State Department of Education, really quarterly. They're looking forward to coming back and doing some tours of our schools with us. But they really are able to give us tremendous feedback. And on the tracker, it really came from our discussion towards the end of the year. It was the end of the year monitoring, looking at, you know, the data that we had at the time. And I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things in regards to what we use. The lost links is for our English language learners. We have a lot of them. I'm saying that we probably will become a bilingual district in Spanish, that we have several of our schools earmarked, and I think we've had growing numbers of our Spanish speaking population. And so when they come in, we measure them with this lost links literacy assessment, and we see where they're at. And it's basically a 1 through 5 rubric, 1 being kind of a novice, brand new to the country, not having a lot of language acquisition, 5 being kind of ready to be in the whole fold and kind of be off on their own. And we found that the data went in 2021 from 53.6% to 69.2% level of literacy. So we did see some measured growth with our English language learners. We were happy to see that. We've actually seen it in other areas as well with SBAC testing. We saw some tremendous growth prior to our COVID. So I think some of the interventions that we have for our native speakers has really been well done. And we continue to give teachers, core teachers, professional learning in the area of English language learners so that they can have a greater impact when the kids are in their classroom and not just rely on the tutors or the EL teachers, but it's a combination of those things. Attendance, I think I've suggested that attendance during COVID was not good, that, you know, that we had a lot of chronic absenteeism. So if a child had COVID, let's say they're in a family that had COVID, they had to quarantine at the time last year. It could be up to 14 days. So they could also then get COVID, and that would be an additional day, you know, 10 to 14, I think, at one point. So you could have a family that all went through COVID, and the child had to be quarantined because his family had it, and then they might have gotten it days later, and then they were quarantined because they were ill. So we had much more chronic absenteeism, because 18 days out of 180 would say that you're chronically absent. And so there were also students when we were knee deep in COVID, and we had some kids hybrid and some kids remote, that we really lost track of. We tried to use our social workers and our whole teams to go out and find these kids. We had a lot that were homeschooled and left from schooling. So it was really a tricky time. We did get more kids back last year. We found that the absenteeism was really, the chronicness of the absenteeism was more related to COVID related. We had actually, I think you looked at the data and I think you said that you found the differential in that.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
a large percentage of our students who were chronic absent last year was due to mostly excused absences. But
Right, so they
unfortunately,
had doctor's notes.
Yeah, the state does not
differentiate.
differentiate with chronic absenteeism
Right.
between being unexcused or excused. Truancy looks at the difference, but chronic absenteeism does not.
So that's definitely something, it's, where we're back to community, attendance matters for both our staff and our kids. And now with the monitor, test and go, we want everybody to check their symptoms. We have test kits coming in and already at the school so that they test if they are symptomatic, have a fever. We say stay home if under those conditions, and we've got a doctor here, so he can tell me if I've got this right. And then, but things like allergies, we were keeping kids home for allergies because we were so fearful. Now we're saying if it's an allergy and you're not feverish and you don't have anything else, other symptoms, then come to school. So, we're really hopeful that we will make a difference, and we're going to really look back at the policy that we created with the board. With attendance, it has tiered levels of intervention. Should we see families that may be facing some chronic absenteeism, and really look at strategies to make sure that our kids are coming to school and our teachers. It's really important that everybody is, in the seat. So hopefully this will make a difference. We saw gains across the board in SBAC in 21 to 22, and but we haven't seen the total recovery back to the 2019. And so that's where we're headed, hopefully, because that's what I want to see happen. So, but they marveled. I think I've said this story a couple times. I love to hear myself say it. But when the Alliance folks came in, they said, this is some of the best data we've seen, and they've been coming to all the Alliance districts and all the schools looking at the plans. But it's still not good enough because we really want them to continue to make those improvements and not only be back to where we were, but even improve beyond that. And then looking at PSAT, Matt's not here to get the credit, but he does a wonderful job doing pre and post PSATs in 9th and 10th grade. And it really is a helpful predictor for how they'll do an SAT. So, and looking at that information, we actually have a course on Apex that helps with SAT. And I believe your teachers, Ted, do some work around SAT questioning. I think we actually implemented it in some of our math assessments.
It's embedded in math and English grade as well as the regular SAT courses that we have.
So even the structure of the questioning to help kids. Sometimes that can be a factor, and we don't want that to be, an obstacle in their way. And then, as I said, growth areas around the absenteeism discipline. Ted can attest to this. We saw more discipline in the beginning of last year. We had, I think, up to 8 expulsions pretty much in the first half of the year, but by March there were none. So till the end of the year. So we kind of out of the gate saw kids really, really struggling with getting back to school. They had all these freedoms, I think, and yet they had been away from peers. So it's almost like they had to readjust to being in school and learning what that was all about all over again, because many had been out for 2 whole years. So whether it was our preschoolers or our high schoolers, we found that there were some challenging behaviors. So we're looking to improve that. And then the 4-year graduation rate, our target for 21-22 is 89.7, and we came in at 88.2. So we're not quite there yet, but we're getting closer to that. And I'd love to see the day where all of our kids graduate from high school, but what they do is they track from 9th to 12th grade, those kids who are still with us, as we are a native population and a transient population. As Tom suggested, that just last year we had 374 leave and 375 come back.
It was almost perfect balance.
So, but that's a net difference of nearly 800 kids that you coming and going. So that's a lot in a community that has basically 4,500 students. So just we keep those things in mind. We are bringing you comprehensive slideshow and data. I'm talking to the principals tomorrow. We're talking about district data team and school data teams and the so what, now what about our data. So what are our action steps with the data? So I think you remember back in the day where we had data to compare and we would give kind of a comprehensive overview of our district data and how it compares to others. But then we would bring back our elementary principals and our secondary principals to actually talk about their action steps. So they would come to you and talk to you about what they're going to do about it. So that's what we're looking forward to doing. And my goal is like, because I'm following that chart you gave me that you and Mike Grenier developed on what happens at the end of September for the regular meeting. And that would be to start showcasing that data. So, any questions? You have 2 questions?
Yes, ma'am. The first one has to do with the graduation rate. Ted, how many people would have graduated? What would the perfect score? What would 100% graduation have meant in numbers?
100% graduation last year in numbers. I'd have to get that number for you.
Are we talking 450?
Oh, no. Yeah, no, this is our, we got 1,000 students, so the classes, if they're evenly distributed, would be about 250.
Okay, so 90% would mean 25 didn't graduate.
Right.
Roughly. So.
But remember, it's a 4-year cohort, so they can move to other districts or come in from us as well, so.
Well, however we calculate
Right.
that 11%, I'm going to guess that some of them stay on and can finish in the 5th year.
Absolutely.
I'm going to guess that some of them have cognitive limitations that they may never graduate.
Right.
And then they get other services. So what is the margin of those? What would be an optimal rate given all the variables that have? Could we conceivably get to the point of 94 or 95% at some point?
Can I do a little segue here?
Sure.
So we have a night school program for kids who are 17 or older. Some students will opt out of regular day school and want to do the night school program and have a job. And I think additionally, I'm trying to remember, was it a dozen students who graduated from night school last year? They walk with our students.
Yeah, we allow them all.
But they don't count according to the state numbers. They count for us. They get a Fitch certificate, and they've met all of the Fitch's requirements. But because they dropped out of the day school and went to this alternate night program, it doesn't count for the state.
So as far as our counting our beans, let the state count the beans the way they want. For our counting our beans, we have 88.2% plus 12 other students that would make another 4% or so.
I think that, well, the first thing is, I'd like to share with the board that this year, when I met with all the seniors at the beginning of the school year, my first statement to them was that all of you sitting in here, my goal is that you walk across the stage at the end of the year. That, I tell them straight out that, that is the goal. That's what you need to stick to. And let's make sure we're working towards that. So yes, my goal is 100%. I have never achieved that, and I don't think any principal ever has. But at the same time, what I want to see in terms of those numbers is improvement. I certainly would like to see a 4-year graduation rate consistently over 90% for Fitch High School, and a 5 to 6 year graduation cohort rate in the 94, 95, 96% range. That would be the goal. Absolutely, 100%.
If you ever decide that we want to communicate this to the general public, and I think this would be personally, I think that'd be great. Struggle over the language to make it comprehensible, but I would use the figure of those who took the night school as well. We're counting our beans our way and they count.
Well, they do count. Those kids do count, each and every one. And we've really incorporated them into the graduation. They used to have a separate graduation, but I really like the way we're doing it now because they get to walk with their peers. And while they might have taken a different route, they got to the same place.
I would also just add, Matthew, to your point, thinking more about outcomes, because an adult school graduation is a successful outcome. Transition Academy, for those students who are in special education who get services to 22, they do not count as successful graduates for us, for the state. So right now, they look like they are, the way the state counts that, that's a retained student, a 12th grader who did not graduate. So that also kind of negatively impacts us. As well.
Which is every district.
Yeah, which is every district, but
is actually
that's why no
successful.
districts really get to 100% just because of that. But
Yeah,
thinking
they
about
do go through
yours,
graduation and then they
Yes.
continue on here till they're
Yes.
22. And they're wonderful members of our community. I
Absolutely.
mean, we love having them here. It makes us feel like a school. They're, you know, they just do a great job.
I'm very proud of the progress that we've made.
Rita?
Oh, yes. I had a question about underneath the, it's regarding how we count suspension. There was a question about how our district calculates suspension rates. What was the question?
So I think it was looking at the accuracy of the data. Tom knew, he actually brought some of this to our attention.
so originally when we had first, at the beginning of the year, the data we had sent from the individual buildings, and there was miscommunication with the buildings where some of the schools were reporting it correctly, where it's, you know, even if you're suspended for 3 days, that's one suspension, right? If it's a 3-day suspension, it's still one suspension. The other school, one of the other schools was reporting it as, well, if you're suspended for 3 days, that's 3 suspensions, right? You know what I'm saying? Counting them almost individually. So at first, our data looked very skewed. We did correct that data, but there was the initial confusion with them about, you know, why is your data coming in inaccurately in the first place? And we just had to explain that, so they understood we were on top of it. It was just a miscommunication.
That's why it's so important that we really talk to all the schools about how to put in this data, because if you put it in incorrectly, you usually, you know, have poor results, you know. So.
Thank you.
Good question. Any other questions about this? I guess this is another topic about how do we present to our town bodies about our alliance and our good work in getting ourselves out of it, and what does that mean in terms of financial picture for us?
But we're not out of it, because I testified and we got our legislators to help us out. So we've got another 5 years.
Right, but
that's
5 years.
We're not gonna stop doing the really good work. That's really always the goal, is to see improvements for our kids. But as I said to the colleagues at the State Department, we appreciate your support. We're invited to more free professional learning, and you know, that having them to help look at the data with us is another outside organization helping us to really see how we're doing, that we're not just doing it internally. We have this external component too, as everybody does with the State Department. You know, all districts have this, but we get a little extra special attention.
So if I'm not hearing anything more about questions around the alliance, I will entertain suggestions for future topics. Our next meeting, I got you, Rita. Our next meeting is wow. Let me try this sentence one more time, because the first 5 didn't work. Is our next committee of the whole. The next committee of the whole is going to be more on the finance and facilities. But Rita.
My question is, Susan had written to us in board notes about why we were not able to secure or be on with Learn for the 2022 MSAC grant.
It was very disappointing.
I know. Could you could you go into a little more detail about that with us next time?
I certainly could. I could bring back, you know, I had a conversation. I followed up with the legal department at the State Department, because you know me, but I'll talk about it next time.
And so
it's not on our agenda, so she's going to talk about it next time.
Great. So my question is also about, you mentioned fledgling magnet schools. I wasn't sure why you use that term in your board notes about our magnet schools. And also, now that there is no longer a moratorium on magnet schools in the state of Connecticut, could we ever open up our schools for as
Oh,
magnet
Rita, you
schools?
just about read my mind. I found that out too, as I talked to the State Department. So fledgling meaning this, this is really our second year of doing the magnet. So we have a lot more areas to learn and grow.
So,
Right.
so Rita, maybe you're suggesting for us to have a conversation about all things sort of magnet school, specifically around why we didn't make the magnet grant. And also, what does that mean for our district if we were to jump into a pool of the no more moratorium on, is it
No. Inter-district, not
Right,
intra,
inter-district.
inter.
Right.
So
inter.
just like some of our students go to New London.
Right. So how about if we, and I see that, Rita, as a different topic,
Yes.
as your wish for us to have a conversation about all the different magnet programs and how they're doing, correct?
I didn't mention that program. I didn't mention that, but
That's actually on your referral tracking
yes,
list.
it is.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a different question.
Right. I'm trying to impress you, Rita, to show that I actually am following through and looking at that stuff. Don't ruin my moment. So, but I guess we were gonna want to know about our magnet programs and how are they doing, to see if we're even wanting to go into the inter
And
district.
whether or not we have room. I don't know whether or not we
Or
have.
either we have room.
Yeah.
Okay, so Susan and I will come up with some ways of doing that agenda. We probably are not going to throw that in next week.
Right.
But it might be something that we could begin to bring that up in our larger meeting, so that the community can become aware of some of that stuff.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
How to speak.
I was so excited, Susan, to read what you said about mentoring. And my instinct is that behind the 150 or 200 words that you wrote are probably another 600 words worth of thought and implementation. And I would love to hear you share with us about mentoring.
So Matthew, to that point, because I feel that this board has started to begin to own this mentoring, not own, but really take interest in it, that maybe each meeting, we just have an agenda item where we're updated, but maybe we need to wait until after you have your staff meeting about that.
Yeah, we're
Can you
gonna
lead
do a
it?
planning meeting at the end of this month.
So once that planning meeting happens, I think that we should then have a regular update and have an agenda item right up until it's continues. Because it's sad that it has gone away, so,
Sounds like a plan.
all right. Any other?
Oh, here she goes.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I have a second?
Rita Volkman, I'll second that.
I'm glad you know your place.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Bye.
Oppose, abstain, that motion is carried. Good night, everyone.
Welcome.
night.
Great.